Welcome to the Teens Behind the Scenes webinar series. My name is Lindsey R. Barr. I am one of the dramaturgs for the Teens Behind the Scenes program at the National Theater. Teens Behind the Scenes is a program of the National Theater Foundation dedicated to providing teens in the Washington, D.C. area with access to Broadway touring productions and professional insight into performing arts careers. In this series, we interview theater professionals to learn more about what they do, how they do it, and how they got to where they are now. Joining me today is Kristin Stowell, a music director. And Kristin, I'd love if at this point you could just share a little bit about yourself.
Hi, Lindsay and all. Thank you so much for having me. I am a music director. I'm also a pianist, a composer, a copyist, orchestrator, arranger, professor, all of that good stuff. I live in DC. Thinking about what else you'd want to know. I studied music in college. I have a master's degree in collaborative piano performance and upcoming projects. I'm working on a couple upcoming national tours, one of the Cher show about Cher, and a new show going out on tour based on the movie Mystic Pizza the musical. I teach at American University. And I also do lots of copy work and recording and other stuff when I have time.
Great. Thanks, Kristin. So you started to mention a little bit about going to school and some of your current projects. So I'm wondering if you could just give us a view into the path of how you got to the career you're at now. So a little bit about your background, your education, your career trajectory.
Absolutely. Most music directors come to the field in one of two ways. Either they're a performer on stage or they're a piano player. And I'm the latter. I have been playing piano for since I was 6 years old, so many, many years. I've always loved musical theater. I grew up doing theater as a kid and in high school on stage, which was never my favorite place to be, but I loved theater. And at some point I made the connection that there's musicians in musical theater. So when I figured that out, I thought, oh, hey, I love playing piano. I would love to play piano for shows. I got my bachelor's degree. I have a liberal arts, a BA in music, which was the perfect fit for me. It let me kind of explore lots of different things. I took conducting classes. I took piano lessons, of course, and all sorts of different music classes with the goal of playing for musical theater shows. At that point, I didn't really know that music directing was a job. I just thought, oh, you just play piano for it. And I started playing for some community theater shows. I went to school at Ohio State in Columbus, Ohio, lots of community theater in that town. So I played for a lot of shows, and eventually someone said, hey, do you want to music direct this one? I said, okay, sure. What's that? And I've been figuring it out as I go and getting training anywhere I can. So I think that's a really common path. Either you're on stage and a vocalist and that a musician in that sense, or you're a pianist and at some point you get asked to music direct. So I music directed for many, many years, decided to get my master's degree and have transitioned now into some more teaching and doing university work, that sort of thing, just because I also love teaching. Music directing, you kind of do a little bit of everything. So that's where I'm still a pianist. I do composing and arranging and orchestrating and copy work, which is where you write down sheet music for people. And that's also really common. Most music directors are music directors and a long list of other things. So, and it all just kind of falls into place where in one show you need to do many different roles, and then you might follow into a career path of just one of those things, but more likely you're going to keep doing a lot of them.
Great. That's really helpful to hear about your path from performing to a different role. I feel like that's common for a lot of us who find ourselves working in theater. Like, oh, we started performing because that's what we thought was the option. And then actually there's this whole world of other things to explore. So if you could just, I know this is really hard given what you've just said, that you fulfill a lot of tasks. If you could distill down what a music director does during a process, how would you describe that?
Yeah, the music director, and it depends on what kind of production you're working on, but oftentimes the music director is kind of a one-person department. Just that's especially true in educational settings in a university or high school show. Usually there's one music director. You'll have other musicians join in for the show, but there aren't other music people in rehearsals and that sort of thing. So you do a lot of different stuff. You're really in charge of everything to do with music in the show. So that usually starts with teaching the cast the music. You work one-on-one with soloists and help them figure out their notes or work on what they're going to do. If they're riffing or something, you help them figure all of that out. You work with the full cast to get all of the harmonies learned and feeling comfortable. And that's an ongoing process, right? Anyone who's been in a show knows at some point you start dancing too, and then we forget our harmonies or things like that. There's so much going on and so many things to keep track of. So music rehearsal is always an ongoing thing. Then at some point you're in charge of the orchestra or the band. And so you need to rehearse them usually separately. You have a rehearsal or two with your musicians. And then you bring everyone together and put it all together. And at each of those stages, there's some rehearsal, there's a lot to learn. You know, if you're an actor on stage, you've probably only rehearsed the song with the piano, and all of a sudden there's a whole orchestra under you. It might sound totally different. And a music director's goal in that situation would be for nothing to sound totally different. So you've been representing it well in rehearsal. Which brings me to another thought, which is usually you are also playing piano for all of the rehearsals. Not all music directors are pianists, and you can certainly be a successful music director without really sophisticated piano skills. But it's really common that you are, and that you are the person playing piano for rehearsals. Even if you're not a fabulous piano player, it's expected you can play, you know, at least well enough to get people through songs and help them learn their notes and that sort of thing. Again, not essential, but it's pretty common, especially in regional theaters or community theaters, especially where there's not a whole team of music people in rehearsal. What else? I guess like there's so many things that can happen in rehearsal, right? Is maybe I've rehearsed just the music with someone, we've worked it all out, learned it, and then on the day we start staging things, the director might say, oh, we need more time there for this transition, or oh, this should go faster or slower or whatever. So it's important to be really flexible and really adaptable, because you're all trying to, you know, achieve the same goal and tell the story and put on a good show. So there's certainly requests the director might have that you may disagree with, which is fine to have those conversations. But for the most part, I think you're probably going to all come to the same conclusion and agree. So in the rehearsal process, there's a lot of changing, especially, you know, when you're dancing, people are moving scenery, like, wow, we can't do that in 4 measures of music. We need 12 measures. So then you become an arranger and you become the orchestrator and figuring that out of, okay, what music are we going to add here? Or this dance break is too long. We don't need it that long. How do we make it shorter? So it's you call on different music skills all the time in rehearsal, teaching, playing, listening, arranging, all of that sort of stuff. So that's sort of your job in rehearsals. Eventually, a music director is a really unique member of the creative team because you're in all of the rehearsals and you're also in all of the performances. So oftentimes the team members who are in rehearsals aren't part of the performances. The director or the choreographer or designers, they might leave. They'll come watch, but they're not really part of the performances. Music director, you're going to conduct the orchestra and the cast. You'll probably play piano. If that's your thing, you'll do all of that at the same time. So then you're also in charge of managing the performances and maintaining them. So, you know, you have to be paying a lot of attention and you're part of the show. If you miss a cue, a song doesn't start at the right time, that can really affect quite a lot of people. So you're part of the infrastructure there. And then as you do a show, performances, if you have 3 performances, great. Sometimes you have 3 months of performances or many more than that. And so a show can kind of go up and down, or things can, start to be less clean, I guess, or things just might need a little attention. So then it's up to you to keep everything maintained how you set it in rehearsals. And sometimes you just need a little brush up rehearsal with the cast or the band, or just a reminder, oh, don't forget, we're holding that out 4 beats, or whatever it is, those sort of things. So you're always a part of the show, and it's up to you, the music director, to keep the music consistent and predictable for the benefit of all of the members of the team, the cast on stage, the pit musicians, stage management. Everyone who's a part of it needs to know what to expect from you.
It sounds like, in hearing you talk about this, that in the same way a stage manager might maintain the integrity of like the direction and the blocking throughout the run of a show, it sounds like the music director is really there to similarly maintain the integrity of like the musical composition and what everyone has agreed on will occur musically within this show. Does that sound right?
Yeah, absolutely. And there tends to be flexibility in musical theater. We might want to do something our own way and change it, but usually that happens really early in the process in the rehearsal room. It won't happen during performance number 25. Performance number 25, we want to sound just like performance number 1 and performance 100. So yes, it's up to you if things are starting to evolve, which happens really naturally, just a matter of bringing things back to where it needs to be, and just helping people remember where we started from and all of that. But it is very similar to a stage manager maintaining the staging, or a dance captain maintaining the choreography. That's your new team. Once the show is open, those 3 people are generally the ones in charge of maintaining things, and in constant communication with each other too. If we need a brush up choreography rehearsal, the music director will probably be there to play piano or something. So it's always very collaborative.
It sounds really collaborative, and I'm curious what I'm hearing you talk about. One of the things that feels really specific that that this role of music director doesn't necessarily entail is like a vocal coach, right? It sounds to me a lot like you're teaching the notes, you're teaching the musicianship of what is being sung on stage, but you're not necessarily teaching the actors how to sing it, or encouraging them to sort of perform it in some way or the other, right? My assumption is that comes from like one, perhaps external training on behalf of the actor, like being in vocal lessons, and also sort of how actors choose to sing particular things or don't choose to sing particular things is informed by the director and the rehearsal process. Can you talk a little bit about that?
Absolutely. And those impulses or ideas can come from anywhere. And sometimes you'll have a vocal coach on staff who's working with all of the actors, and certainly they would help them with the interpretation. Sometimes you don't, and the music director would do vocal coaching. It's tricky. There's never enough time in rehearsal to do everything we want to, right? So
Yeah.
So in music rehearsal, especially in the beginning, the focus is usually these are the notes, these are the rhythms, let's get them down. And then we move into interpretation. And individual actors working with their voice teachers is really valuable to music directors, that someone is out there on their own time, or when they're not called to rehearsal, working on the interpretation, and then they can bring back in a realized performance or a prepared thing, and I can give them thoughts or suggestions and say, that might be straying too much, or I love what you did with that. Any choices that the actor would make would need to essentially be approved by the music director, but it doesn't have to be thought of by the music director. And if we have time for interpretation coachings, or I have ideas I really want to try, we will certainly make time for that. And especially with actors who don't feel as comfortable with that. Some actors really like coming up with ideas and really want to try things out, and others feel like, I want you to tell me what to do. And music directors, they're happy to work with all types of actors in that situation. So in that case, I can propose ideas, and then the actor will decide what they like, and we'll decide together what works best for the show. So yeah, it is useful, definitely, when people have done that sort of work on their own and worked out the acting and all of that, and see how that influences the music, which can definitely, like you said, come from a director too. Is they want certain songs or certain moments to go in a certain direction, and that's going to influence how they're sung. So that's always really useful. But if anyone's not really getting there or not totally sure how, it's always possible for me to coach them and give suggestions and ideas too.
That's great. Yeah, I hadn't thought about it that way, of being like, it's an interpretation. It feels like the teaching how to sing and then the teaching of the particular music, like the interpretation lives somewhere in the middle. And having a music director to tie that thread feels really important in the process. I'm curious, you've talked a lot about sort of what you do in rehearsal, what you might do to support the actors to learn the music, how you work in collaboration with the director and stage manager and dance captain sort of after the show opens. And in theater, we know, right, big theater people, we know there are like very specific types of rehearsals or very specific moments in a rehearsal process where things have to come together, or we want them to come together, I suppose I should say, speaking to your flexibility before, of like things shift and change. So I'm curious if you can talk about the beginning of the rehearsal process, right? Like when you're there on day one at the first read through, what is your role as the music director? And then in theater, we have something called the sitz probe, right? Which you've already pointed to, which is the first time those actors hear the full orchestration. And that usually happens pretty late in the rehearsal process, right? And so I'm wondering if you can talk to us about what your job is on those specific moments in the rehearsal process, and how you just work through them very differently.
Absolutely. I prefer, and most people I work with feel the same way, to teach all of the music before we even open the script on the first day. Mm-hmm. So we would start day one of any process at a university, on a tour, a regional theater, all of that would start with music rehearsal. And we would just be learning all of the music. If you have an assistant music director or an associate, you can be in two different rooms. I might be in a room with 10 people learning a big group song. They might be with 2 people working on a duet, so we're always trying to best manage our time and resources. So that's really common, is to have a couple rooms going where everyone's learning music. If it's just a one-person team, we'll just be in one room, but usually we spend at least the first couple of days learning all of the music. And then maybe on day 3, it depends, it could be any day, but then we'll have our first read through, sing through. And the advantage of that is no actor is reading the script and reading the music for the first time without any information or coaching. It's really not expected that you would walk into a first rehearsal knowing every harmony you sang. I would expect that you walk in familiar with the music, and if you sing a solo, you know that. You don't have to be perfect at it, but you've heard it, you've maybe tried it. But I don't expect you to have any idea what harmony part you should learn, because it all depends on the whole cast. You might usually sing a part. I always sing soprano, and maybe in this next show you're going to sing a couple alto lines because we ask you to. And most actors are so flexible and love trying new things. So I don't need you to work on any group numbers, but it helps if you've heard them. And when we're teaching them, it's like, oh right, I've heard this part. So the first couple of rehearsals would be just music, teaching everything, learning everything, and then we'll sing through and read through the whole show. which gives me a lot of information too. Once we put everything together in that read through, it's really obvious what's kind of stuck and what hasn't. If we're all really struggling, like, oh shoot, what was my harmony there? It's just a place that I know, okay, we'll review that in our next rehearsal or what have you. So it's really helpful for the actors too, of course, because they're going to sing through and read through the whole show. So they learn what their journey is and just how much downtime you have or don't have, and all of that too. Like, oh, wow, this big song is followed by another big song or something like that, So, yeah, usually we start by learning all of the music, and then we'll sing through the whole show just to hear how it all fits together. For a Sitzprobe, that is, like you said, when we put the orchestra and cast together for the first time, usually with the whole sound team. So if we have microphones, everyone will be in their microphones. It might be on stage, it might be in the lobby of the theater or something, but people will be properly amplified so you can hear yourselves, you can hear the band. That does usually happen really late in the process, and it's an advantage to that is we've rehearsed with the cast a lot, so we know exactly how we're doing each song. We know exactly all those moments where maybe we've added music or we've cut music or we've made something slower or faster. That has all been communicated to the orchestra. I've then rehearsed with the orchestra exactly how we rehearse things with the cast. So there's no, oh wait, we added 4 measures there. None of that. Everybody's on the same page. Of course, after that, rehearsal changes can happen too, and in which case we'd communicate those as well. But the actual Sitzprobe rehearsal is a big day for the music director because you're in charge of everyone, and everyone is looking to you for your leadership and guidance. And like I said, an actor might hear a song and it might sound really different than how they've been hearing it before. We'll always be going at the same tempo. We'll have the same amount of music and intros and all of that, but a delicate flute solo sounds really different on a flute than on a piano, right? Or a big rock moment sounds really different with drums and guitars than just a piano with no drum set. So things sound different, and that rehearsal, the whole purpose is really to orient the cast to what the band sounds like or the orchestra sounds like, and to orient the orchestra to what the cast is doing and how they're interpreting things. Because again, in cast rehearsals, I'm trying to represent the band, what it'll sound like on the piano. You can only do that to some point, to some degree. In band rehearsals, I might sing the songs so they can kind of hear the lyrics. I'm not really a singer. I'm not going to sing them exactly how the actors are singing them. It's still helpful information to kind of hear what's going on. But you're not going to get the big, beautiful, dramatic interpretations that the performers are going to give the actors. So we're all kind of acclimating to each other. And that can be most often really exhilarating and really fun for everyone. And at moments, really stressful, right? When it's like, oh, wow, that's really exposed, or wow, that sounds different than how I was thinking. Okay, let me think how I'm going to deal with that. And so it's important as the music director, I think, to, be confident and calm and guiding everyone through those moments. And in a Sitzprobe, we might sing a song one time. Great, let's move on to the next one. We might have to do a couple moments a few different times just so people can get used to it. Or like, what was that? I don't really understand where I'm supposed to come in there. Or maybe I'm not counting that right or something. So it's a rehearsal. So if we need to do things a few times, absolutely we will. And in those rehearsals, it's all about the music. So we're not really dancing. We're not doing any scenes. It's just one song after the next. We might skip songs that are, just, if it's a song that's just with piano, I'd probably skip it in a Sitzprobe because we've done that version in rehearsal. And that sort of thing. If it's a big underscore moment, I'll skip it. We did that with the band. It's fine. We want to put things together in that rehearsal.
And the understanding is from Sitzprobe on that then everyone is just together in the rehearsal throughout the rest of the performance time, right?
Yeah, generally. And sometimes you do a Sitzprobe a few days before tech or something like that. And in tech rehearsals, it's most common to not have the whole band there. It's most common to just be the music director. Maybe you'll have drums too if it's a big drumming show. But the whole band wouldn't be there. So you might have a Sitzprobe rehearsal on Sunday night, and then you're in tech until Friday or something. So then Friday, the band comes back. That's an arbitrary schedule I just made up, but then the band comes back and you're all together. Then basically once you're in the theater and the band's there, you're all there. And yes, certainly in performances, you would all be together.
I think hearing you talk about this is bringing up two things for me. One is I always think about The Room Where It Happens from Hamilton, and thinking about there's like this banjo motif that goes underneath of it. And I always think about that as this moment of like, if I were singing that song, that's an instrument I wouldn't anticipate hearing, right? So the Sitzprobe, to your point, might be a really good point, a really good moment in the rehearsal process to be like, oh, that's what this moment is going to sound like. And it actually doesn't change how I sing it necessarily, but now I'm familiar with what it's going to be in the moment. And the second thing it reminds me of, I don't know if you're on TikTok or if you're on this side of TikTok, but it's relevant for music direction and also Spring Awakening, which is a production I know that you just worked on at American University. Is there's a side of TikTok where all of the previous, a bunch of actresses and actors who have played the role of Martha, which is an ensemble role, apparently has really difficult harmonies in a few songs. And so all of these people are going on TikTok and they're like, once you know this harmony, it's like in your DNA because it's so hard to get down. And it's like all of them just singing Martha's harmony, like by themselves, being like, I sat for so long at a piano and learned this. And it seems like that's exactly what you're pointing to, right?
Yes, and that is bringing me back. We did just do Spring Awakening at American University, and before each performance, there's a sound check where you go down the line. Every person who wears the mic just sings a little bit from the show. We make sure it sounds good from a technical standpoint, and a lot of the people would sing, some song they sing for sound check, and you hear the craziest harmonies in that moment because it's just one person singing. And yes, I can perfectly imagine our Martha nailing those crazy harmonies.
I was thinking about the production American and you all when I getting so many of those on my TikTok. And so to speak to that sort of academic process, you mentioned that you're about to embark on a national tour process, and you've also engaged in new musicals, right? And so I'm wondering if you could talk a little bit about not necessarily the differences between those three things as pieces of theater, but those differences that you would approach as they come to those different types of music direction, right? So like how might you approach it in your academic setting versus a national tour setting versus what's your role when you're working on a new project?
Yeah. And the truth is, the biggest difference is budget, right? So at a university, you're working with a smaller budget. You're probably a one-person music team. On a national tour, I'm not a one-person music team. I might be the music supervisor, and then I have a music director, and then I have an associate music director, and then we have an orchestrator. Those could all be different people. Even you might even have a copyist. You could have 5 people on that team. At a university, you're probably those 5 things are your job. So that's the biggest difference, is how your role might change in that sense. It's certainly possible to be all 5 of those people. On one tour I'm working on, I am the supervisor and the orchestrator, which kind of by default makes me the copyist as well. But I'm the music supervisor, and we have a music director and an associate music director. The rehearsal process is really no different. And this past fall, I was working on a tour and had to go to our tech rehearsals. We were opening the tour in Arkansas, so that's where the rehearsals were. And one of my musical theater classes, I had them watch one of our tech rehearsals on Zoom. They wanted to, they asked to. So we watched a little bit of the rehearsal just to see what it's like in a professional setting and on a national tour. And then we had a conversation afterward. And one thing they all agreed on and said, which I thought was really interesting, was, wow, this is just tech. Like tech is the same everywhere, even in college, even in high school. And I think that's a really interesting and important observation, because I knew that, but I had never thought like, oh, you might expect it to be different or a lot more formal or something. But people were kind of joking around, and everyone's doing their job and taking it very seriously, just like they would at school. But it's not this rigid thing. We're all there because we like doing this, right? So yeah, I think the process tends to not vary that much. I would always want to start with music rehearsals, do a read through, sing through, then we're going to start staging. We'll keep doing music rehearsals as needed. And that's true in the professional world. That's true in the academic world. Working on new works is one of my favorite things to do. And that can be really different because often you're not working up to a production. You're working up to a reading or something like that. If it's a workshop, it might be a production of a new show, but I do a lot of workshops. So what that means is the writers are working on the material with actors for the first time or the second or third time or something like that. So that process, we're not leading up to a production, so there's not staging rehearsals. It's just all music rehearsal and interpretation rehearsals with the director, like reading through scenes. We're not working on who's standing where and what we do on counts 5 through 8 or anything like that, because people are probably just going to be sitting in chairs or maybe standing at music stands. So it's a lot more just about the material and allowing the writers to hear it. And in that process, it can be really fun because they're going to make changes every single day. Like once they hear how a song sounds and hear how things sound in context of the show, they'll make decisions of like, oh, you know what, that part is too long, or that part, I didn't like how that flowed, or I don't think we need this song right after that song, or something like that. So a lot of changes will be coming in. So that can be really fun as an actor if you like working on your toes, and if you're a quick learner, it can be really fun. That's not for everyone, so it's okay if that's not you. But and as a music director, your role is number 1, flexibility. Number 2, you are the composer's supporter and champion. So you work really closely with the composer in those settings. And they might ask your opinion, they might ask for suggestions or something. And that's great. You can be really collaborative, but it's if you've ever written a show or written anything and handed it off to someone, it's terrifying. And that's their child. So you're there to take care of their child, and it's not your child, So I think in that sense, you really want to have the composer feel like you trust them. You're going to do exactly what they want. And they need to hear the music exactly as they wrote it. If something isn't working, that's a composer's decision. And if I feel like something isn't working, or if an actor has communicated something to me like this part's really difficult or something, you can have those conversations and it's helpful. But ultimately, you're there to really support the composer and help them hear everything exactly how they wrote it, so they can make decisions on what they want to do with it. And in those cases, the first music rehearsals, it's usually impossible for the actors to walk in with any familiarity because it's a new show, right? So if this is workshop number 3, or if the composer has demo recordings or something, they could listen to those. Often there's nothing. They don't get music until they walk into the room and we hand them sheet music, and that's the first they know of it. So then you're really going to be teaching note by note. So it's really important to just keep that in mind, and every person learns differently. So just being flexible with how people are. So I have some people who say, can you just plunk out these 8 bars for me and I'm going to go home and work on it, because they might want a lot of time with it. Absolutely. We're also going to try and sing it together in the room, just to work it. But like anything that, everyone learns differently. So if they know they need more time with it, I'm happy to help facilitate that.
It's really striking to me to hear you talk about this, because I personally, as a dramaturg, have worked on a lot of new play development processes, but I haven't been in any new musical processes. But what's interesting is that I'm hearing you say things that are very similar to dramaturgy and direction in a new play process, right? Which is like, I am here in my role as director or my role as dramaturg to ask questions and to support so that I can help facilitate the vision that you see for this project, right? It's actually like not at all about me or my thoughts. It's all about like, how can I support what you're doing? And so it's really fascinating to hear that in a new musical process, that a music director sort of serves in that similar capacity of like, this is what it sounds like, this is what it is. How do we make sense of that? Does it stay? Does it go? Does it live somewhere else? And I know, many of my early internships of my career were spent in literary offices and new play development processes, where a playwright or a composer might come in one morning and be like, I have 16 new pages of material that we need to slot in today. And that's just like a part of the process.
Oh yes, and when you print out a song, a short song could be 16 pages long. So yes, it's pages and pages and pages, and then getting out of your body what you learned yesterday and putting the new stuff in it. Yeah.
Yes. And I just, being an intern in a literary office was a lot of like, okay, this page is actually not a new page. It's like part of the page before. So it's page 16A.
Yes,
and like figuring all that out.
absolutely.
So it's really interesting to hear about that in a new musical context. And so it sounds like there's a lot of adaptation, lots of flexibility, regardless of sort of what process you find yourself in. So I'm curious if you can share, like, what is something about this job that always keeps you on your toes or always keeps you really excited and engaged, regardless of what show you're doing or what process you're in?
Yeah, I think you're just going to be on your toes the whole time. There's so many different people, different collaborators in the process who all will have an opinion on the music. And those are the performers who are actually singing the songs or playing the songs. It's the choreographer who needs, who's designing movement to this music. If we're interpreting a song at really different tempos, that really affects what they're doing, right? So making sure you're on the same page with them. The director, any producer could walk in and say the guitar's too loud or anything like that, And so I think just being open to feedback is really important, and then knowing what feedback you'll act on and what you might not want to. If there's a moment with a big epic guitar solo and someone says the guitar is too loud, I might say that's a guitar solo, or like, is the whole band too loud, or what can we do? Because we do want the guitar to be loud there. Or I think this needs to go a little slower because, and then have a reason. If it's just like, oh, I like this a little slower, and it doesn't really match the dancing, so they want to go faster. Well, that's not a super great reason. It's just like, I like it slower. So I always remain flexible, and again, we're all working toward the same goal, really. So how can we achieve that together? And some things are like, gosh, we can't play that any faster. Like this physically, a drummer can't drum this specific thing any faster than that. There's limitations, but those, we rarely reach those thresholds. But I think in performances, you'll be on your toes a lot too, because like I said, if you have one weekend of shows, great, simple, wonderful, we did it. If you have weeks and weeks and weeks of shows, that's a big mental task for anyone to be paying attention the whole show. And your body kind of gets used to the moments when you don't have to pay attention, meaning there's a long scene where there's no music or something. So you have to be on your toes in those moments so your mind doesn't go to a totally different place. And then you wake up on your cue line or something like that. And you're, as the music director, no song is really ever going to start without you communicating to someone that it's starting, whether it's you playing the first notes, you conducting the first notes, pressing go on a click track or something like that. So you really have to be very attentive. And in show 56, that's a lot harder than in show 6, right? So that'll keep you on your toes. And I think that's just a normal human response to repetitive activity. I did have another thought, but it might have left my mind. I'm sure it'll come back. Yes. All right. You go next.
Okay. Yeah, that's great. I'm so glad you brought up this point about collaboration. And it also sounds like operating in the rehearsal process as like an agent of good faith, right? Of like we are all here together. We're all working for the same goal. At times in theater and in musical theater, especially, we're dealing with sometimes really emotional topics or topics that stir up a lot of personal feelings. And I appreciate you framing it as like, all of that, none of this is personal, right? It can be personal to you, but the feedback isn't personal. The feedback isn't meant to be, or the thoughts about how something might change is not meant to be hurtful or harmful or like trying to drag you down, right? It's all in service of this larger process. And I think, I think that when you're really into it, sometimes it's hard to step back and be like, oh, no, we're all here for the same thing. This is going to be good when we're really needing it at the end of this process here. So I just really appreciate you speaking to that, because I feel like we're all in theater because we like to collaborate. That's my feeling. Or we would have chosen different careers, right? But I'm also you already answered what my next question was going to be, which is like, how do you stay attentive for a 3-hour show, right? You're not like one of the ensemble members who gets to dance and then leave the stage for the next 2 numbers, right? Like you're sort of always in there. So I appreciate you mentioning that, because that was my next question. What skills, education, experiences would you suggest for someone who is interested in becoming a music director or engaging in the music direction process from, you mentioned copyist or orchestrator, things like that? What would you suggest?
Yeah, so many things. I think most people in any of those roles has some level of piano skills. And the piano, it's often the first instrument we start on, and there's a good reason for that. It's really quite a literal tool for teaching and learning music. And music directors, more and more, are expected to be proficient pianists. When you're conducting and playing a show, you are in charge of communicating to the actors, communicating to the musicians, maybe running click tracks. You're probably playing a keyboard that is using different sounds, so you're changing between the sounds. You are, watching for your cues, listening for your cues. You are doing so many things that if your mind has to be really, really focused on the notes you're playing, it makes everything really difficult. So I would say a really essential skill is to work on your piano skills, especially if you feel like that's not really second nature for you. It almost needs to be second nature, so you can conduct and communicate and do all of that without giving a second thought to what your hands are doing on the keyboard. Every show might have some song where that's not possible, and the focus is, okay, in these 8 bars, wow, this is a really virtuosic thing that I'm really focused on. And that's okay, but you can't play a whole show like that, really focused on what you're playing. You have to be able to focus on listening and the actors and the musicians and all of that. So a very essential skill is piano, practicing all the time. It's the only way to get better. If you're a great sight reader, that's a wonderful asset. If you're not, again, just practice. There's no secret to sight reading except do it as much as you can. So I encourage everyone to take piano lessons your whole life. as a music director, you're in charge of so many musical things. Like I said, if the director is like, we have to move this huge piece of scenery and we only have 8 seconds, it takes 30 seconds to move it. We have to add more music. That needs to be something you can do, is figure out what's the music we're going to add or what's the music we're going to repeat. Where does that make sense? So if you're not really a confident musician, that might be a big challenge of knowing like, okay, which section could we repeat and it would sound good and it would work with what's going on stage. So I think any music training you have is going to be really valuable. I encourage people to take music theory classes. It's just where you learn the language of music. It's so practical. It's so wonderful. I love it so much. And if you hate music theory, you can still be a good music director. But I think it's important to learn that. So any music training you can get is going to be valuable. It's going to make you a better musician. And a music director, you don't have to be the best musician in the orchestra, but it helps if you are, or if you're at least confident in your music skills. So you can again, a huge part of music directing is communicating. So if you can confidently communicate to musicians, we need to cut off on beat 3. We need to, can you play this note instead? If you need to change something, like to be able to communicate those sort of things is really, really valuable. And it gives people confidence in you. If you seem confident, people trust you. And then it's important for the musicians and actors to trust you as their leader. I think also just, there's so many opportunities to do musical theater. There's so much community theater anywhere you go. There's a lot of professional theater too. And people are open to helping you learn. If on the tour I was working on last year, sometimes people will reach out to the music director and ask if they can sit in the pit for a performance. They just want to watch what the musicians are doing. And the answer is always yes. Like, yes, we'd love to have you. If it's like 20 people who want to sit there and record, like that would be no. But if it's like one person, a student who just wants to watch the music director or watch the drummer or something, absolutely. We love sharing that sort of thing, and it's hard. You often can't see the orchestra where you're sitting in the audience, so you might not realize like just how much they're really doing or what their role is and what do you do when there's a 5-minute scene and you don't have to play anything. So it's just that sort of thing. You can always reach out to people, and if there's a tour coming through your town, you could look up who the music director is. See, Google them, find their email, send them an email, say, hey, you're coming to my town. Could I sit in the pit? Or, you could get coffee with them or something if you want to. It depends. But when you're on tour, you don't have a lot of downtime, but you're certainly in the pit during the show. So you'd be welcome. People would be welcome to join. I'm thinking about anything else. I think, be familiar with different styles of music. If all you've ever listened to or played is musical theater, time to branch out a little bit. Listen to some classical music, listen to pop music, country music, rock music. Musical theater is all the time based on contemporary music or music of a certain time period, or it might be even. We did Head Over Heels last year, the Go-Go's. It was all music by the same band. So being familiar with different styles is really valuable. If you're only interested in musical theater, you'll be exposed to a lot of different styles because it is a really diverse genre. But knowing source material for things is really valuable too. So I would say just, broaden your horizons. And then as a music director, like I said, you're a pianist, you're not composer, you're a conductor, all of that sort of thing. So you could take a conducting class, a choral conducting class, an orchestra conducting class, any of those sorts of things, or even composing classes will make you a better musician, even if you feel like I'm not really a composer. You learn so much learning how to write songs. So anything that makes you a better musician is going to make you a better music director.
That's excellent. It's really nice. It's always really nice to hear that the ways in which this job intersects with lots of different skills are all skills worth practicing, right? That like not one doesn't necessarily precede the others, but that they're all valuable and worth practicing. Is there anything else you want to add about the role of music direction? Anything you want to share for up and coming music directors? Anything?
Yes. That's a great question. I'm sure there's so many things I would love to share. I love music directing, and I love all the different roles you get to fill in that position. And I will say one thing that I struggled with in this profession and with music in general is being a perfectionist. And that will get you nowhere and very frustrated very quickly. And one thing I learned is that copy work is a really good place to be a perfectionist. And copy work is when you are writing down sheet music. So you use a software program. Most people in New York use Finale. You could also use Sibelius, or there's Dorico. There are other ones. You're using a software program to create sheet music. And sometimes it's your own music that you're writing down. Sometimes someone sent you a recording and you're listening and writing it down. That's a lot of copy work, is really transcribing. And when you're doing the copy work, you're making decisions on how, again, you're communicating, how to best communicate the length of this note, the pitch of this note, all of that sort of thing. And that is where, if you are a perfectionist, you might get a little satisfaction because you will make a final decision and it will look beautiful on the page. And if it doesn't look beautiful, you can change it. Say, you know what, that doesn't look great. I need to rework that. Or that looks confusing. I wonder how I can phrase that differently. So I think perfectionism is ultimately your enemy and something to not strive for, especially in music and theater and these subjective worlds where, you can't control very much. But I don't know, I've just always found that interesting, that when I'm doing copy work, I'm like, yes, this is the perfect way to write that down. And so it can be very satisfying. A lot of musicians don't like doing copy work. And I think for that very reason is because you have to make these final decisions and it has to look good and all of this stuff. But for the right person, it's a really satisfying part of the job. And some people, that's their job. They're music copyists. That's it. If you're a music director, most often you'll be doing copy work, but that won't be your main job. But it's very common that you will need to do some at some point. Like if you change the key of a song in the show, you're going to have to rewrite it for your musician so it's in the right key and that sort of thing. It was a little bit of a tangent, but
No, it was a helpful tangent because I think it speaks back to what you've been saying this whole time, right? About like flexibility, and there are roles for everyone sort of within this world of music direction that might suit your skill set best. But knowing like if you tend toward perfectionism, like, hey, this thing might be a really good fit for you. If you're really open to being super flexible and adaptable, like maybe the new musical development route is where you really want to put all of your pennies, so to say, right? So I think that's really great. That's really helpful. And the acknowledgement of like, that's a skill too, right? Like practicing flexibility, and keeping that at the top of mind as well. Well, Kristin, this has been so incredible and really educational, really informing. So I want to thank you again for taking the time to talk about your experience, all of the wealth of knowledge that you bring, and sharing it with all of the students at Teens Behind the Scenes. Thank you, thank you, thank you.
Thank you so much for having me. It's been my absolute pleasure. I love music directing and I love talking about it.
Well, we can't wait to see you on national tour for sure.